Hello and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for participating and joining with us today. My name is Helene Barr, and I'm the Bureau Chief of the Climate Change and Clean Energy Program here at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. As a little bit of background, my program oversees New Jersey's participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which we fondly all call RGGI, and you'll be hearing that term a lot today. And my program helps to really coordinate the investment of the RGGI auction proceeds across the state agencies, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Today is our third of 4 public stakeholder events where we will be discussing the development of the next RGGI strategic funding plan. This new funding plan will cover RGGI auction proceeds collected from 2023 through 2025 and guide their investment in climate, clean energy, and equity projects throughout the state. The webinar today is seeking feedback from you on funding priorities related to clean buildings, clean electric grids, and reducing highly warming refrigerants. The feedback received today will be used to inform our final funding plan. I'd also like to note that we released the RGGI scoping document, which provides even greater detail and background on RGGI, the legislation governing New Jersey's participation, and the proposed funding initiatives that we'll be discussing today. So if you want even more information, you can access this at nj.gov/RGGI/engage. And we just dropped that in the chat. So before we dive into the agenda, just a little bit of housekeeping and ground rules. So all online participants are currently muted. At the end of the presentations, we will have an opportunity for folks to unmute themselves and provide comments or ask questions. We will ask participants at that time to raise their hands, and we will take you off mute one by one. We will also address a handful of comments that we've received prior to this meeting and questions dropped in the chat. Our panelists will try to address as many comments and questions as possible at the end of this presentation. I'd also like to note that this meeting is being recorded. If you're not comfortable with being recorded, you're welcome to leave. And this meeting will be made available on our website at nj.gov/RGGI/engage. We will also circulate a link to the recording via our listserv after our last stakeholder meeting, which is next Tuesday. I'd like to ask that everyone attempt to keep their individual contributions brief to ensure that as many guests as possible can participate in the discussion. I also ask you to keep your comments and questions to the topic at hand. This is really your opportunity to provide meaningful feedback to the state on how we should invest our RGGI dollars, and we, the state agencies, really want to hear your opinions on this. We all acknowledge that there's a lot of environmental and social issues we could be discussing today, but today's meeting is really meant to focus on how to invest these RGGI funds. We also ask that folks please be respectful in the chat. We're going to be posting webinar chat ground rules, and we're asking that participants really utilize the chat to indicate if they're having technical issues so that we can help everyone readily participate in the webinar. And we're also asking that participants refrain from thread jacking and utilizing the chat for unrelated discussions. The chat is really meant to capture your comments and questions, which are directly related and pertain to this webinar. So this morning you will hear from Bob Brabston, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, and he'll be giving us a few opening remarks. Next up, you'll hear from Bob Kettig, the Assistant Director of Climate Change, Clean Energy, and Sustainability at the NJDEP, and he's going to give us an overview of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, how it works, New Jersey's history with the program, and the laws and regulations governing the state's investment of the RGGI auction proceeds and greenhouse gas reduction efforts. Next, you will hear about potential funding initiatives related to buildings, the grids, and refrigerants from experts from the 3 state agencies that are given the funding to invest. They will go over the landscape of building electrification and efforts to move away from highly warming refrigeration systems in New Jersey, and they'll provide in greater detail the potential projects and programs each agency could fund with RGGI investments to support the state's broader greenhouse gas reduction strategy. Following the presentations, we'll dive into an open public comment session. Throughout the webinar, we've also sprinkled in a few polls just to keep it engaging. The first poll is just to get a sense of our audience today, and we're asking everyone where they're from. This poll will remain open and in the chat throughout the webinar, and I'll give everyone a few moments to respond now. You can see that it's looking like it's a bit of a mix. A lot of state government folks. Like, shout out to all my state government friends here today. Okay, and like I said, this will stay open in the chat, as people come. We encourage you to please take the poll, so give us a better sense of who we're speaking with today. Okay. In the event that you can't stay for the full session, or you really do have detailed comments that you would like to share, we have developed a survey to collect your feedback as well. You can access this survey through the QR code on the screen or by visiting our nj.gov/regi/engage webpage. The survey will be open until April 21st, and it provides an opportunity for open-ended commenting at the initiative level. And now I'm going to hand it off to Bob Braxton, the Executive Director from the Board of Public Utilities. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. I appreciate it. And good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to say hello and welcome everyone. I'm Bob Braxton, and as Elaine said, I'm the Executive Director of the Board of Public Utilities. And I just want to welcome everybody to this. I think is the third of 4 public webinar meetings that we, along with DEP and EDA, have been hosting to educate the public and other interested parties about the future use of RGGI funds and to gather input from people on how to use those proceeds and how they should be reinvested here in New Jersey to meet the state's climate and equity goals. So we're taking turns hosting these meetings and also in doing so to give some additional focus from our particular areas of expertise on the funding uses from the different agencies. And I really want to thank DEP and EDA for leading the initiative and the strong partnership that has been demonstrated. The 3 agencies have really collaborated well in a number of areas, including some real complicated policy areas. And it's a tribute to the teamwork and camaraderie of the people who work at these agencies. And I just want to commend everybody for the efforts. It really, in my view, your efforts are doing wonderful things on behalf of the residents of New Jersey. So since today's meeting is being hosted by the board, I wanted to take a couple of minutes highlighting the funding that our agency will be responsible for distributing. Part of it will be pursuant to an MOU with DEP to collaborate on a number of clean and equitable transportation projects, including $25 million from the BPU to help fund 21 projects across the state, predominantly in overburdened communities, including supporting an electric rideshare and shuttle program in Trenton and Woodbridge, and dozens of electric school buses in communities across the state. Our joint efforts in 2021 alone helped avoid over 1,600 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Just to give you a little scale on that, that's the equivalent of about 315 homes electricity use for a full year, or 3,740 barrels of oil, or transitioning over 61,000 incandescent bulbs over to LEDs. So not insignificant, and as we're probably all aware, every little bit helps when we're faced with the urgent climate change issues that confront us and really everyone. We've also, just a few months ago, the board authorized a medium and heavy duty electric vehicle charging program. The primary goal of that program is to improve New Jersey's air quality, contribute to helping the state meet transportation electrification goals, and assist small and local businesses in gaining access to EV charging equipment in order to ensure the equitable build out of charging infrastructure in the state. Medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification is particularly important because those vehicles are proportionately larger contributors to greenhouse gases and they tend to be concentrated in the more urban, overburdened areas of the state. So that's a particular area of emphasis and something that we're putting a lot of effort into trying to tackle. The program offers incentives for community and private fleet charging as well. The application portal is still open. It closes May 12th, 2023. And please take a look at the BPU website for more information and for application instructions. Today's webinar is focused on buildings, grid, and refrigerants. And the board and EDA are specifically interested in getting feedback on ideas featured in Initiative 1, Advancing Healthy Homes and a Stronger Grid. And the DEP and EDA are interested in getting feedback on Initiative 5, Phase Down of Highly Warming Refrigerants in the scoping document during today's meeting. In a moment, my colleague Bob Kettig will walk you through a presentation that outlines the statutory and regulatory requirements associated with the RGGI funding that each of the agencies must adhere to in distributing funds, as well as some background on the strategic funding plan and a summary of the RGGI funding from the previous 3-year funding period. Then we'll have agency staff briefly walk through some key components, and I'm delighted to have some of our really strong, talented staff members on with me today. Matt Rossi, Henry Gaida, Rupa Deshmukh are all here on behalf of the board, and I'm looking forward to the engagement today. Finally, just a sort of an overall framing statement. The purpose of developing a comprehensive strategic funding plan for RGGI proceeds is to ensure transparency and consistency and allow programs to leverage each other's goals and other potential resources to really try and make sure we're getting the most benefits we can for the state. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bob. And again, thanks for having me today and looking forward to the engagement. Bob, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Appreciate it and appreciate everybody joining us here this morning. I am Bob Kettig, Assistant Director of Climate Change, Clean Energy, and Sustainability at DEP. And I'm going to walk you through a little, just quick background. What is RGGI, how it works, the funding plan, and kind of what are the reasons and benefits for this funding plan, which we're stakeholdering today. So background, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, is a market-based program designed to cap and reduce CO2 emissions from fossil fuel power plants at or above 25 megawatts of capacity. And it's important to note that the 12 states currently including New Jersey, they participate in RGGI under their own individual states' statutory and/or regulatory authority. And they write individual state rules that are based on the common model rule that has kind of the key tenets of the auction platform and how allowances are tracked, etc. But each state is participating in RGGI under its own authority. So, quick background how RGGI works. So, RGGI works in the following way: a regional cap is established for CO2 emissions in tons that is permitted to be emitted from the fossil fuel regulated sources. So electric generating units above 25 megawatts of capacity. The regulated sources are required to purchase in quarterly auctions or through third-party transactions from other market participants allowances that are equal to the CO2 emissions over a 3-year control period. So at the end of this control period, all the sources have to have purchased allowances in equivalent in millions of tons, equivalent to their emissions over that period. And now the cap declines over time, and this sends a price signal to the markets, and sources that emit less carbon per the unit of generation are going to have a competitive advantage. Sources that don't emit any carbon do not have to internalize the price of the carbon, and they would also have a competitive advantage. So by putting a price on carbon, sending a signal to the market, that's a key way emissions are driven down. And then thirdly, but certainly not last, and we're discussing here today, states through their own laws and rules invest the proceeds of the CO2 auctions in CO2 reduction initiatives, and or they use the revenue from those auctions to offset the cost to ratepayers. So there's really two key tenets to RGGI on how emissions are driven down, and it's important that we focus on these key tenets as we're looking at developing a funding plan and how the investment proceeds are going to be used, because we want to, again, the program is designed to drive down emissions. So the first key tenet is that the declining cap allows price signals to be sent to the market, and the cost of compliance is lower for lower emitting sources. So that is a big part of how the emissions are driven down. But really, secondly, and really just importantly, is that we have to be good stewards of the revenue. And consistent with New Jersey statute, the state auction proceeds are to be used, invested in projects, programs, initiatives that reduce the demand for electricity or directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, like we're going to invest in transportation. So you're driving down emissions in two ways: price signals to the market and a prudent investment of the RGGI revenue to achieve emission reductions. So here's a kind of a timeline history of RGGI and New Jersey's participation in RGGI. I had the opportunity and the honor to be one of the original staff that were involved with RGGI when we were getting in the program the first time back in 2008. We are in the program under the authority of the Global Warming Solutions Fund Act, which dictates in statute a lot of the requirements that I'll briefly go over some of them for why New Jersey's in RGGI and what we're required to do. Again, we are driving down greenhouse gas emissions, so it's all tied to meeting the state's mandates under the Global Warming Response Act, right? Which is including getting an 80% reduction in economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So New Jersey enters this really unproven market. It really was the first time that a large-scale cap and invest program was tried, and I think it would be also, it's important to point out that we're a 12-state region in this, but the economy and the gross state product of all of the 12 current RGGI states, if it was a separate nation, it would be the third or fourth largest economy in the world. So the 12 RGGI states, besides China and the United States, really have an economy equal to greater than virtually all the other nations of the world. So the market influence that we have here, should not be minimized. New Jersey participates in RGGI during the first control period, the first 3 years. New Jersey was pulled out of RGGI. Governor Christie pulled New Jersey out of RGGI, and we had a period of time which we were no longer in it. And then through executive order, Governor Murphy declared that New Jersey should re-enter RGGI, and we did. So the ball started rolling. As all the things we had to do, we had to adopt new RGGI rules, which we did, and we entered the program in January of 2020. So that was the first auction we took part in. The second time we're in was the first quarter of 2020. And that takes us to where we developed the first RGGI strategic funding plan, which covered years 2020 through 2022. It's hard to believe, we were stakeholdering this. It's hard to believe that was over 3 years ago that we were stakeholdering in the first plan, but here we are in the second one. And the first plan was heavily centered on incentivizing clean and equitable transportation. That really dovetails with the recommendations of the 80 by 50 report, and that the transportation sector is the largest emitting sector in New Jersey. So as Bob was explaining, a lot of medium and heavy duty vehicles funding, a lot of the focus was put on that to achieve good things. So here's, again, I've talked about the statutory requirements of New Jersey entering RGGI under the Global Warming Solutions Fund Act. And so at a high level, what the act does, it in statute specifies how the proceeds of the auction are going to be divided up between the three state agencies, the EDA, the BPU, and the DEP, for funding projects and programs consistent with the mandates. So the EDA focus is centered on commercial and institutional operations, while the BPU is focused on low-income, moderate-income residential sector. So really mitigating the impact on ratepayers, and clearly also there's a lot of opportunity for the building sector and energy efficiency opportunities. The DEP is their proceeds are split. 10% goes to local governments, which we've used to fund a number of clean transportation initiatives, electrification initiatives, and 10% of the DEP's funds goes to forest and tidal marsh restoration programs. So great opportunity for forest restoration, big carbon sink. Also, urban forests help mitigate the impacts of heat island effects, and tidal marshes, along our coastline, provide a great opportunity for just a massive amount of carbon sequestration as we try to manage tidal marshes in the face of rising seas. So what is the strategic funding plan? This is kind of some lessons learned from the first time in RGGI, although we didn't get to really spend much of the money because we were in it for a brief period of time before pulling out. But the idea was that, while the statute requires that the agencies get their separate pots of money, if you will, to go to these specific project and program types, it was clear that coordination among the agencies would allow a leveraging of those funds, and where there were statutory requirements to put funding for a particular agency in one sector, the funding plan gives an opportunity for coordination and maximizing the opportunity for the emissions reductions per the dollar spent, because that's what we're really focused on. We want to be good stewards of the money, and we want to achieve the mandates consistent with the act to drive down emissions per the dollar spent to the greatest extent possible. So again, the plan, it's jointly developed at least once every 3 years by the three agencies. It's going to identify initiatives that will be funded under the RGGI auction proceeds, and that's what we want to hear from you all stakeholders about, ideas, opportunities. And it ranks the importance of each objective and initiative, again, because we want to be responsive to the specific requirements of the act. It summarized projects and program spending and the results achieved during the previous strategic funding plan. So we're going to report on what we've done, what worked, what we felt could work better, and take opportunities from lesson learned. And it requires 4 public meetings, one of which we are here today, to fully vet what we hope to achieve in the plan and get input from stakeholders. So the strategic funding plan, it has 6 main objectives, and we refer to this as the 5+1 because there are 5 that are required in statute, and they requires a net reduction in greenhouse gas emissions or sequestration of carbon, and it requires a significant reduction in GHG emissions or energy demand reduced, and a significant contribution to meeting, again, the 2050 goals of 80% reduction for 2006 levels. An important point relative to the cost. So we want to be good stewards of the money again, invest the proceeds, and achieve the greatest reduction and benefit for the dollar spent. Thirdly, reduce energy use, reduce electric consumption for energy efficiency. Not only do you reduce emissions, by reducing energy consumption, you are also helping mitigate any impact on the ratepayer. Be directly responsive to the recommendations submitted in the Global Warming Response Act and the 80x50 report. So, the Act spells out what our goals are. Our energy master plans and our 80x50 report, illustrate the sector-specific pathways that we should be following to achieve the reductions. So we want to be consistent with the plans that we've laid out. and provide co-benefits to the state. So what could co-benefits be? Well, co-benefits certainly could be green job creation, economic benefit, and a large co-benefit is, while the RGGI program is a CO2 reduction program, the reduction in fossil fuels will have a corresponding reduction in criteria pollutant and hazardous air pollutants. And particularly, as Bob was saying, we've targeted a lot of the investments towards medium and heavy duty vehicles, because you have that sector tends to have a lot of older diesel engines in it, and it really provides the opportunity to take some, to replace some high emitting engines, particularly high emitting of like ozone precursors, NOx, VOC, and fine particulates. So those co-benefits of criteria pollutant reduction certainly improve air quality, especially in overburdened communities. And those are the five requirements of the statute. And then, of course, to be consistent with Governor Murphy's executive order, that are the investments have to be directly responsive to the negative impacts on human health and the environment in communities that are disproportionately impacted from environmental degradation or climate change. So in overburdened communities, we're centering where our investment proceeds are going. So a review of where we were with the first RGGI strategic funding plan covering years 20 to 22. The first RGGI strategic plan was launched again in April of 2020. This is again hard to believe 3 years ago. 4 initiatives were identified. They were to 1, catalyze clean and equitable transportation, 2, promote blue carbon in coastal habitats, 3, enhance forests and urban forests, and 4, to create a New Jersey green bank at EDA to fund climate mitigation efforts. And we are doing these. Nobody really accounted for obviously the global pandemic and the impacts that had on supply chains and manufacturing of durable goods, etc. So we have I'll show you a slide where we have our investment so far, but there's a lot in the pipeline that's been allocated as globally we're recovering, and particularly durable goods and electric vehicles, getting those things through production and out for deployment. So as I said, here's a recap of the RGGI investments to date. From the RGGI investments from the first strategic funding plan. So we have about $372 million that have been received through the allowance auctions, and of that, 260+ million have been dedicated to projects. We have 153 projects have been selected to date, and I'm sure this number has climbed, but we have 497 electric vehicles have been incentivized, and about 17,000 trees will be planted. There's a focus on urban communities and schools, school areas, and again, double here benefit, sequester carbon, and also with shade trees mitigate the impacts of heat island effects on areas that have a lot of impervious surfaces. 56 acres of forest has been restored, or will be, and we have 155 acres of wetlands that are to be restored. And estimated CO2 equivalent emissions avoided is about 210 or 209,000 metric tons. So potential funding initiatives for the second funding plan, which we're discussing here today, advancing healthy homes and a stronger grid. Again, we will still be doing consistent with the first plan, some efforts to fund clean and equitable transportation. Again, consistent with the statute, strengthening New Jersey's forest and promoting marsh restoration and blue carbon in coastal habitats. And a new thing that we're looking at for this round, and we'll touch on today, is a phase down of highly warming refrigerants. We have some corresponding rules regulating the reporting of refrigerants. We're collecting data, but we do know that hydrofluorocarbons, refrigerants, have a very high global warming potential. It's like could be 1,000 times or more, essentially the warming impact that the same volume or same mass of CO2 has. So there's opportunity where we think that there is opportunity to mitigate leaks, and make an impact with the reduction of the highly warming gases. Again, so for today, we're going to focus on the healthy homes, the stronger grid, and a phase down of the refrigerants. And now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague at BPU, Rupa Deshmukh, who will discuss the programs to advance healthy homes and a stronger grid. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. I'm Rupa Deshmukh, Energy Efficiency Manager at the board. And in the next few slides, I'll talk about opportunities to use RGGI funds to advance healthy homes in New Jersey. Next slide, please. There you are. To provide a bit of background, as this chart shows, residential buildings are responsible for 16%, whereas commercial buildings are responsible for 10% of the total emissions in New Jersey. Together, the building sector is responsible for 26% of the total emissions. The emissions are largely due to furnaces for heating homes, boilers for heating water, and gas appliances. This slide shows some of the key actions that the state is taking to reduce building emissions. Of course, the Energy Master Plan of 2019 calls for reducing energy consumption and emissions from the building sector with a focus on equity, environmental justice, economic development, decarbonization, and public health. And the 80/50 report released in 2020 prioritized pathways to achieve these goals by 2050. Then there was the Zero Energy Buildings Codes Collaborative, which developed a roadmap for cleaner buildings through effective building codes. The Clean Buildings Work Group was announced by Governor Murphy last year, and that's helping the state's strategic roadmap to clean buildings, laying out recommendations for policy, legislative, workforce, and funding strategies to create cleaner, greener buildings that support and benefit New Jersey families and workers. Finally, Governor's recent Executive Order 316 sets the target of 400,000 homes and 20,000 commercial properties to be equipped with zero-emission space heating and cooling systems, while making 10% of all properties and low and moderate income electrification ready by 2030. Now, currently, the New Jersey Clean Energy Program within BPU funds residential and commercial energy efficiency programs that are administered by the utilities and the BPU. Then we have the Whole House Pilot Program, which is an innovative initiative also funded by the BPU to eradicate hazards such as lead and mold in low-income areas. This program works in partnership with Comfort Partners that focuses mostly on weatherization to remove barriers to creating not only energy efficient, but healthy homes. This pilot is currently enrolling 100 homes in the Trenton area to provide whole home solutions. Next, CPACE, or the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, is administered by the EDA and facilitates the funding of clean and renewable energy infrastructure at commercial properties throughout the state. The CPACE provides financing towards, for example, rooftop solar, electric vehicles, charging, microgrids, etc. So BPU could use its RGGI funds towards new program or enhancing existing programming to benefit low and moderate income households, particularly those in environmental justice communities. So this could include developing building electrification programs to reduce energy utilization and emissions, say by installing heat pumps. RGGI funds could also be directed towards scaling the Whole House Pilot Program in low-income communities across the state. These funds could also continue to build upon existing energy efficiency programs such as benchmarking, which is the recently released benchmarking program is mandatory for commercial buildings greater than 25,000 square feet, and it requires reporting of building energy and water use. There's also another program that's voluntary for all other building types. So the funds could be expanded to residential and multifamily buildings where incentives could be provided, as an example. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague Marta Cabral to talk about EDA initiatives.
Great, thank you very much, Rupa. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marta Cabral. I'm a Senior Project Officer for Clean Energy at the New Jersey EDA. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the proposed projects for the EDA as it relates to this Healthy Homes and Stronger Grid initiative. So NJEDA funding from this newer portion of RGGI funds could be dedicated to a couple of different projects and programs as it relates to this initiative. The first revolves around implementing grid resiliency projects, which would reduce electrical outages in overburdened communities, because of course, improving New Jersey's electric grid to be more robust and resilient would help make the grid more reliable and avoid unexpected power outages. The second revolves around financing beneficial electrification, renewable energy, distributed energy resources, or energy efficiency projects in commercial buildings. So for this point, on the energy supply side, financing could be provided to facilitate the construction of distributed energy sources that allow for local power generation through projects such as photovoltaic panels or battery storage units. Local power production through clean energy sources could both reduce demand on the grid and cut down on the inefficiencies of longer distance electricity transmission from power sources. RGGI funding could also be used to help finance improvement and retrofit projects that would reduce commercial and institutional buildings' greenhouse gas emissions. These include funding projects that could help transition away from using fossil fuels like natural gas in order to heat buildings. Additionally, other building systems such as cooking and hot water production could also be switched from fossil fuels to electric power. And beyond switching to cleaner fuel sources, energy efficiency improvements in buildings, such as upgrading insulation or using demand-responsive lighting and HVAC systems, can reduce a building's overall energy demands. And I should mention that these initiatives would be complementary to the EDA's Garden State CPACE program that Rupa just spoke about on her previous slides. And then lastly, on this slide, RGGI funding could be used to provide innovation grant funding for research, development, and piloting of new renewable energy technologies, equipment, materials, or software, such as, for example, through the Clean Tech Seed Grant Program. So in addition to funding the implementation of existing renewable energy technologies and energy efficiency practices, the adoption of new technologies would also be important in further reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the state. And the EDA has continued to provide funding through the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology, what we call CSIT, to support the development of clean energy technology companies that can be transformative in addressing the climate crisis. And through the existing Clean Tech Seed Grant Program that currently is active as we speak, grant funding has been awarded to emerging technology companies through the state to support their ongoing research and development efforts here in New Jersey. So similar funding could be used from future RGGI auction proceeds for this. And as Bob Kettig mentioned earlier in this presentation, each initiative must have at least one objective ranked as critical. And so this slide shows the 5 objectives that the BPU and the EDA have proposed to rank as critical for Initiative 1, our Advancing Healthy Homes and a Stronger Grid initiative. And so these include, of course, a net reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, or impacts on ratepayers, and the second bullet point that's already been read, so I won't read the whole thing again. Same thing, being directly responsive to the Global Warming Response Act, of course, providing co-benefits, and then being directly responsive to the negative effects on human health and the environment in communities that are disproportionately impacted by the effects of environmental degradation and climate change. So those are the 5 initiatives that, or the 5 objectives that would be ranked as critical for those projects. And that means that any spending associated with the initiative would be predicted to provide measurable and verifiable benefits toward furthering those 5 critical objectives. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to my DEP colleagues again.
Thank you, Rupa, and thank you, Marta. That was great. So before we jump into the next initiative, we're just going to do one quick poll to gauge the audience's interest in a clean buildings initiative. We'll launch that now. So we're asking on a scale of low to high, 1 being a low priority, 5 being a high priority. How do you feel about funding the Advanced Healthy Homes and a Stronger Grid initiative? Okay. So that will stay live in our chat throughout the duration of the meeting. Feel free to vote if you haven't already at some point. And now I will hand it over to Kai Azrell. He is the Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Sustainability here at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and he's going to talk a bit about our 5th initiative, phasing down highly warming refrigerants.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kai Azrell. I'm the Bureau Chief for Bureau of Sustainability, and I'm also the Rule Manager for the Greenhouse Gas Monitoring and Reporting Rule. That rule was passed last year, and now the reporting for refrigerants, methane from gas companies are being reported now and recorded now for monitoring and reporting. So for the HFCs in New Jersey, the hydrofluorocarbon emissions account for 6% of the state's greenhouse gas inventory. And these HFCs are considered a climate superpollutant. So these short-lived climate pollutants are greenhouse gases with hundreds to thousands of times the heat-trapping power of carbon dioxide. HFCs are synthetic gases used in air conditioning systems, aerosol propellants, foam blowing agents, solvents, and flame retardants. These gases were first developed as alternatives to ozone-depleting chemicals. But after their rollout, it was learned that their release to the atmosphere during the manufacturing process and leakage during use or servicing and retirement or replacement of equipment, those releases pose a grave threat to our climate. So things like an HFC 134A is a commonly used HFC gas, and 1 pound of 134A has a heat trapping potential equivalent of more than 1,500 pounds of CO2. Another regularly used HFC is R404A. It's a common refrigerant that has a global warming potential of 3,900, which is nearly 4,000 times that of CO2. So the warming potential release from a 130-pound tank of R404A is equivalent to driving 14 cars every year. So, and I'd also like to say that these refrigeration systems have thousands of pounds of these types of refrigerants in them, especially if they're used on a commercial or industrial scale. So for some background on HFC decarbonization efforts, the Environmental Protection Agency made certain HFCs unacceptable for use in SNAP rules 20 and 21. So that was back in 2016 and 2017. However, those SNAP rules 20 and 21 were partially vacated by the DC Circuit Court. So despite being vacated at the federal level, New Jersey chose to adopt our own timeline for the implementation of these rules. And we did that on January 21st, 2020, under New Jersey Statute 26:2C-61. So that changed the status of listing of certain HFCs used in specific applications. The result is that New Jersey has ruled out various HFCs and HFC blends that were previously considered unacceptable substitutes for CFCs and HCFCs. So So when we change their use from acceptable, we change those to unacceptable, and these are specific end uses like propellants, spray foams, refrigeration, and air conditioning sectors. This rule does not prohibit the manufacturing of these refrigerants. It only has certain uses and specific applications that are being prohibited into the future. So this rule also does not prohibit the continued servicing of equipment using restricted refrigerant if the equipment was installed or operating with the restricted refrigerant before a specific date. The inventory of HFC emissions in New Jersey has been made using estimations based on population and industrial parameters. So the department determined that additional reporting information is needed to better understand the actual emissions of HFCs in the state. Since refrigeration system and chiller leaks are the most significant source of HFCs in New Jersey, the Greenhouse Gas Monitoring and Reporting Rule was promulgated on June 21st, 2022. So facilities like grocery stores, ice rinks, refrigerator warehouses, and other industrial applications for refrigeration are required to report their refrigerant usage to the department. The threshold for refrigerant reporting is collected from refrigeration systems that have 50 pounds or more of refrigerant at a full charge, with a global warming potential of at least 150 times the heat absorption of carbon dioxide. The department collects this refrigerant usage information from these facilities annually, and then collects the greenhouse gas emissions from each individual source. Those results will inform our greenhouse gas inventory. For phasing down highly warming refrigerants, we're looking at curbing the use of these HFCs as refrigerants. And this is evident in laws passed by New Jersey and newly proposed federal rule to phase down HFCs under the AIM Act. However, making the transition to ultra-low commercial refrigeration systems or chillers may require additional incentives. Funding the incremental cost from the installation of new refrigeration systems to ultra-low systems will accelerate the adoption of these systems and have immediate impact on reducing the global warming pollutants from this sector. Creating similar incentives in overburdened communities for retrofitting or replacing high GWP refrigeration systems or chillers will keep much needed commercial facilities like supermarkets in neighborhoods that may otherwise not be able to afford the transition on their own. Using funding to ensure that existing systems are operating with repair and maintenance programs designed to prevent HFC leaks, to quickly and immediately repair any leaks, especially for those in those commercial refrigeration systems in overburdened communities. So we want to make sure that we address the need of reducing these highly warming gases in the entire state, but specifically we want to be able to do this in a responsible manner so that we're not adversely impacting those overburdened areas that may have a harder time making the transition. So as you can see, the phase down of highly warming refrigerants priority ranking, this initiative would meet a lot of the criteria here. So, of course, phasing down the use of highly warming refrigerants meets the critical need for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And it is needed to meet the state's 2050 Global Warming Response Act goals. Another critical priority that would be met is a reduction of energy use by having new refrigeration systems that use ultra-low refrigerants, because those systems are actually more energy efficient than the ones we have now. So these are the areas that we're meeting by working on replacing and phasing down these highly warming gases for these ultra low global warming potential gases in the refrigeration, air conditioning, and other uses that definitely contribute to the climate issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy. Really appreciate that. Really in-depth, sort of an often overlooked sector of our greenhouse gas emissions that's really critically important that we get under control here in New Jersey. So we're going to open up another poll right now just to gauge audience's interest in the HFC highly warming gases. Again, 1 is considered a low priority, 5 a high priority. This poll will remain open in the chat, so you don't have to do it immediately. Seems like folks generally also agree that this should be a high priority. Okay, so moving on. We are now going to open up our facilitated public comment session. So folks, we're going to ask you to please use the raise hand feature that you should see at the ribbon at the top of your screen. And the raise hand feature will then automatically put people in a queue, and we will enable your mic. And then you'll be able to unmute yourself. So it's kind of a little bit of a two-step process. And then you can provide comments or pose questions at that time. You can also, if you don't want to be unmiked and just want to drop a question in the chat, we will also review those and pose them for you. So it looks like Kip, I'm sorry. Kip Cherry is the first person that has their hand raised. If we could just enable Kip's mic.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep, sure can.
Great. I want to just look a little bit at the transportation sector, and I know that that's not your primary focus today, but I was wondering if you could clarify BPU's role in getting electric school buses onto the road.
I don't know if someone from BPU wants to respond.
Good morning, and thanks for that question. The role of the BPU is really to try and create programs that will allow the local districts to figure out whether or not electric buses are a solution that they want to investigate on their own. We want to make it easy for municipalities and school districts to try that out. We don't have a direct role in making those decisions on behalf of school districts, however.
Can you clarify a little bit about what you're doing? I think that there's a lot of drag going on with the school districts. They're aware generally of what's going on, but they don't really know how to proceed. And they have a lot of other things on their platter. And it just seems as though, and also a lot of them have the feeling that only disadvantaged communities really qualify at this point. And so, you know, they're really not moving very fast when you consider how easy it is to reduce greenhouse gases with electric school buses.
Well, and Rupa, please feel free to jump in here. The only thing I can really say about that is that these are big ticket items, and we're trying to make it easier for the districts to do it themselves and provide them with resources and education on it. We're in the early days of the medium and heavy duty vehicle program, so it is something that we're looking at expanding in the future, but I'm afraid I don't have a lot of detail to give you on specifically what districts can do sitting here today, beyond what's already been published.
Okay, well, I was just, I mean, if there's some specific things such as, for instance, helping them with charging stations, you know, that might be useful because I think they're not really aware of how to put all that together. And some funding programs only include financing the school bus, but not the charging station, for instance.
Okay, I appreciate that input, and we'll certainly take that to the program staff and make sure that's something that gets addressed.
Okay, great. I mean, we have basically 3 agencies involved with EDA, BPU, and DEP, and it's kind of a morass for the districts as to how to get going. At least that's my observation.
Thanks, Kit. We will definitely bring that back to our colleagues too, that are the transportation focused folks here at DEP. They're not on the call today, so I don't want to speak out of turn. That's being managed by a different program, but we'll definitely bring your concerns there.
Who should we talk to at EDA and about that?
I don't know, Marta, if there's someone at EDA that you would recommend.
You can certainly reach out to me or my colleague Olivia Barone, who's doing a lot of our EV work on our team. And I can, yeah, you can reach out to me and I can point you in the right direction.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, thanks.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else want to raise their hand and provide comment? Okay, looks like we have Carla Sosa. If you can unmute.
Hello, everyone. I had a couple of questions that are a little bit more logistic. So for example, I don't know how many, I've looked at the survey, and I don't know how much detail there currently is for some of the programs, because we're being asked to rank them, right? So for example, I'm with the Environmental Defense Fund. We're interested in, building a resilient grid. But we want sort of like more whether there are more details or wondering whether there are more details, for example, on the EDA initiative to implement grid resiliency projects. So I was wondering, first of all, whether there are more details on some of these programs or initiatives.
Have you checked out the scoping document?
I have.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is, sort of where we've framed out, and that's like probably the most level of written detail that we have at this point. But if you have specific questions, I think Marta can respond to those now or, in a sidebar conversation via email.
Sounds good. And then one question that I had about sort of the ranking and the prioritization, is there an idea at this point of whether the funds would be split, each initiative, the one that's most important would get the highest percentage, and then as you go down, the percentages would be lower, or how that prioritization would work once it's, being tied to actual funds, if that question makes sense?
Yeah, so, right now the funding gets split, 60% goes to EDA. So depends on what initiatives they end up actually sponsoring in the final plan. And then they will make a call in writing that final plan about the percentage of funds that'll get allocated to those initiatives. So if you have feedback as to, you really think they ought to prioritize initiative 2 over initiative 1, like that's the type of feedback we're looking for now. And that would be laid out in the final
Perfect.
plan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, it looks like Doug O'Malley has his hand raised. If we can enable his mic.
Sure. Thank you so much, Elaine. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yep, we sure can.
Pretty nasty spring cold right now. Yeah, so I just wanted to thank, all the agencies again for working to kind of have this, not only the collaboration on the program, but also the stakeholder process. I know the meeting last night was kind of the first hybrid meeting, and while there might not have been huge attendance, just very appreciative of the work of the agencies to do the outreach on the strategic funding plan and on these initiatives. And I also just wanted to thank the staff on obviously you, Helene, and the two Bobs and Kai and Marta and Rupa. I had some very specific questions just on some of the programs that were discussed. I did want to just come back to a more kind of global question, which I did ask last week, but I didn't ask with, I guess, enough specificity. So, there's in the discussion of RGGI allocations, there's obviously the money that's been allocated and the money that has not been allocated. I believe the unallocated dollars are more than 100 billion or more, roughly 112 million dollars. Is the allocation for those funds going forward, will that use the old strategic funding plan, or will that wait for okay, it will use the old plan?
Yeah. So we feel that, the funding from 2020 through 2022 is committed to that old plan. So you'll see continue dedication of those funds to either existing incentive programs that are out there already, or creation of something, potentially new that falls within those initiatives that were in that funding plan.
Great. Okay. Thanks. That obviously makes sense. I just realized I didn't have that clarity from last week.
Yeah, no problem.
And then I did just have some questions based on Rupa's presentation, which obviously it covers a whole host of programs, some which are already up and running. So let me know if it's appropriate, Rupa, for you to answer, or for other folks to chime in. I just wanted to get just a little more detail on the whole home retrofit program, because that's obviously had a lot of promise and a huge obviously a huge potential, because there are so many homes that Comfort Partners needs to walk away from because they don't have adequate funding, and don't have the full mission for a retrofit program. It would be great just to kind of hear about a little bit more on the success and honestly some of the challenges that the whole home retrofit program has faced.
Yeah, thanks, Doug, for the question. Yeah, so as you said, right, exactly, the goal of the whole house pilot program is to kind of fill the gaps that Comfort Partners, doesn't provide for, which is, because there are some customers, with like lead and mold issues that get turned away by Comfort Partners, and so this program is essentially, kind of designed to address those questions, fill those gaps, so this program is in the early stages, as in GHHI is conducting these conducting surveys of homes in Trenton. To get more information about what are the challenges they're facing, what problems do they have in their homes, and Trenton was chosen for the pilot because it ranks among the municipalities with a lot of older building stock, with folks having high energy burden, and there are also cases of lead poisoning and asthma emergency cases. So this is Trenton is a good good community for kind of having this pilot program, and we would like to see implement this program in 100 homes, as I said earlier, and the plan is to kind of observe, do an evaluation, like see how this program performs, learn from this program, and in future be able to like scale it up to other communities across the state. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, and I guess the I guess the obvious question would be, it's a pilot, right? It's a limited number of homes. The dollars are there. How many more? What's the thought of expanding, right? And obviously, RGGI funding could be a way of thinking of expanding. What's the kind of once you're reaching the end of the pilot phase, what is the thought to expand? Is just to go to another, one other city? Is there, what's the kind of scope of expansion? And maybe that isn't obviously finalized yet, but I'm just curious if you think how many other cities whole home the whole home program can get to.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I mean, we have, the state, we have done the mapping of, the communities that this program could be scaled up to or could be expanded to. But again, as we are still, I mean, this is a pilot, so we definitely want to learn lessons from this, and how we can, how we can expand this program to other communities in the state. So more to come.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Rupa.
I've dropped a link in the chat where you could.
Oh, super. That really appreciate that. And then I guess I wanted to go back to just a more a global question, and one I'd be kind of remiss without saying this, because Bob Kettig kind of referenced just how long it's been for New Jersey to officially be back in RGGI, and this started back in 2005, and Bob's comment of the first joining the program 2008. It's great to be back, right? And this was a huge priority for Environment New Jersey during the Christie years, and we filed litigation to have New Jersey to rejoin RGGI, and this was one of the first actions from Governor Murphy through Executive Order 7 to rejoin the program. So the governor kind of spoke importantly of RGGI's record of investments during this, I believe, the State of the State this year. You know, RGGI is the program that works. That being said, other states have had you know, a jump start because of their ongoing involvement throughout the 2010s. And I believe, Helene, you obviously referenced that, you know, you and the rest of staff, not just at DEP, but other agencies, spend a lot of time, excuse me, a lot of time with other state agencies, kind of comparing notes. And I just wanted to kind of reference 3 of the initiatives that we heard. Again, Rupa, you were referencing them, specifically low-income homes being ready for electrification, the CPACE energy efficiency program, and energy efficiency benchmarking. I'm just curious kind of how many other states are kind of using those programs and funding those programs directly through the RGGI program, and any lessons that can be learned there.
So what were the programs that were funding directly with RGGI? What type of the building ones? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, basically
Yeah.
the ones that Rupa was referencing, but CPACE, the goal for 10% of low-income homes to be you know, ready to be electrified by 2030, and then some of the energy efficiency benchmarking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think energy efficiency work is historically what a lot of the RGGI states have, you know, utilized their proceeds options to fund. So I think that that's very much in line with, like, you know, the last 15 years of RGGI work. Most states have really funneled their funding into those types of projects and programs, as well as like more traditional renewable energy type projects. And right now we're really seeing a shift. A lot of states are starting to think about beneficial electrification and starting to put some of their funding towards those types of projects. So I think we're very much in line with, you know, what sort of the rest of the pack is doing.
Yeah, no, thanks, Elaine, for referencing the beneficial electrification as becoming the next thing for many RGGI states. That's helpful. I assumed as much, but it's helpful to hear that directly from you. And just one last question, because I know others may have additional questions. I'm really appreciative to hear the work, Kai, on just the tremendous impacts that I believe was RF4 can have as a greenhouse gas pollutant. And then just a similar question as the ones I just asked Helene and Rupa. Are there other states that have kind of adopted RGGI funding for this purpose? Are there other lessons that can be learned from other states, or are we kind of the first here?
What was the chemical that you had a question about in particular?
I believe it was you know, my notes may not be perfect here,
like
but
R24.
R24, yes.
That
Thank
one,
you.
right?
Well, I mentioned R404.
R404. Okay.
Yeah, R404. That chemical is an HFC. It's being used in refrigeration systems. It's used throughout New Jersey. It's used throughout the country. So it's not a substance that's banned or anything like that. However, having said that, there are phase downs that are going to be occurring for that particular compound that it will take effect in the coming years. So, and when that happens, these types of facilities can drop down to a lower GWP refrigerant, but still would be considered high. Which mean, and our definition of what that is anything over 150 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. So the ultra low ones are going way below that. They're at 1, or you know, they're 0. So you know, you have these other compounds that can be used as refrigerant, and that's the direction we want to head into. We don't want to even entertain the idea of these low GWP refrigerants. We want to go down to these ultra low ones. So now, what are other states doing? Well, there are other states. California, definitely one of them. Massachusetts is another. But there's also a federal requirement that's on the potential of coming out. It's a proposal. It's not a law or a regulation yet. The law is the AIM Act, which is the American Innovation Manufacturing Act. And that particular act looks at these types of refrigerants and how they should be regulated, specifically for their global warming potential. So, and that incorporates any of the phase downs that the federal government would want to impose on those particular compounds. So, yes, this is going to be something that happens over time. We're looking to accelerate that process, and just as some other states are looking to accelerate that process as well.
Got it. Thank you, Kai. And it's really heartening to hear that New Jersey is on the kind of cutting edge with California and Massachusetts, and hopefully the feds too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I can say too, just one thing, in terms of incentive programs, we're aware that Massachusetts and California both have them. I'm not aware that any of the other RGGI states are using their funds towards this, so we really would be bleeding edge in terms of dedicating funding towards this effort. Okay, so looks like I want to get to the one question that we had that was submitted. Doug Benton, can you unmute and read that for us?
Sure. So we had a question from a pre-registrant. Isabel Molina asked, can RGGI do more to promote the narrative that building electrification works in New Jersey, will not cost ratepayers extra through government incentives, and is good for human health? The fossil fuel industry has been winning that narrative.
So I don't know if maybe BPU, Rupa, do you want to take a crack at answering that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so certainly, right? I mean, RGGI funds can build upon existing BPU programs, such as the scaling the whole house pilot, or scaling our current or new the newer programs such as benchmarking and program evaluation. So these kind of efforts, I'm sure, using the RGGI funding would kind of divert funds from the ratepayers. So definitely, there's a lot of potential for alleviating cost to ratepayers. I don't know, Bob Bratson, if you wanted to add anything, or Matt or Henry.
No, Rupa, thank you for that. I think you captured it perfectly. We're looking at RGGI as a force multiplier for the things that we're trying to do.
Great, thank you both. And then it looks like Kip again from the audience. If you want to unmute yourself, if you have follow-up comments or questions.
Okay. I wanted to follow up on something that Doug said, and when you had mentioned it earlier, this pilot program in Woodbridge and Trenton. Could you talk a little bit more about that program and what's involved? I noted in my notes something about ride sharing, but I don't really understand the whole program. And if say you're a resident in Trenton, who do you go to get involved in that?
Is it the whole home pilot program, or is it a?
Well, I don't know. I'm just kind of feeling my way to try to get my arms around what's involved. Pilot programs are really important because they, are the beginning of something that's going to be much bigger. And Trenton is certainly in need of help. And so
are you talking,
really...
is it like the e-mobility, like the Go Trenton pilot program? Are you thinking of that one?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. I don't really know, much about what's going on in the pilot program, and I'd be interested to know what the components are of it, or what's involved.
Yeah, I can speak really. I don't know a ton about it, but yeah, one of the things that DEP with its RGGI dollars and in partnership with BPU is funding some e-mobility pilot programs. And I believe we just dropped the chat and the link where you can get a little bit more information about that. And perhaps that's what you're thinking of. And I know that one of those pilot programs is called Go Trenton, and it's providing access to neighborhood electric vehicles, which I think kind of are like more like kind of golf cart kind of sized vehicles for transportation in and around the neighborhoods, as well as doing some sort of electric vehicle shuttle out towards the areas where a lot of jobs are in the warehouses, to sort of connect the folks that live in those communities with where their jobs are, through clean transportation option and network. So, and I do believe that in the next funding plan, again, I don't have the transportation experts on the call today, but when we previously talked about the transportation initiative, that they were looking to continue to fund those types of pilot projects throughout the state.
Okay, well, that's interesting. We have a very large warehouse project proposed for West Windsor, which is right up Route 1 from Trenton. And there isn't really great bus transportation to link the two. And that would be something that would be really a fantastic opportunity for Trenton to get a lot of people there employed at this new warehouse complex. Would that be something that might fall into that kind of program?
Yep, I believe so.
Okay. And in terms of housing electrification, is there something, could you give me any kind of idea of what all's involved there? I mean, Trenton has a huge housing stock that's in fairly bad shape. And there are a lot of people in Trenton that feel kind of stuck there. Princeton is nearby, very expensive. So it's hard to move out of Trenton. Hamilton, there are some areas, but the housing costs go way up as soon as you move out of Trenton. And so my observation is that a lot of people really can't afford to move out. Not that they should, but I mean, they're doing the best they can to cope with what they've got. So in terms of building electrification, where would somebody go if they were interested in trying to become part of that?
And I'll have to hand this one off to BPU, perhaps Rupa can. Oh yeah.
Hey, hi, my name is Henry Gaida. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff here at the board. One common answer for both this question about electrification programs and then also the Trenton e-mobility project is to actually visit the ISLES organization website. I'll put the link into the chat, but ISLES is a community-based organization that's based in Trenton, and they predominantly look at various quality of life issues in the city. And they have some really fantastic programming that helps address some of those issues, one of which is e-mobility, and then the other is workforce development training on energy efficiency and electrification programs. They just recently received, I believe it was a $2 million grant for some workforce development efforts and to train a local workforce. So, as we do move forward to electrify households, which effectively just means building envelope improvements, as well as electrifying the way we heat and cool our air and water. They just received some money to be able to do that work and train some folks. So I'll put a link into the chat about just so you can learn some more about that.
Okay, well, that's great. I'm familiar with ISLES. I didn't know about this grant. In fact, I'm with the Sierra Club, and we are now renting offices in the same building that ISLES is in. So I'm hoping that we will become more close to ISLES in terms of working together with them. So, okay, well, that's good. Thank you for letting me know about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry, too. Hey, anybody else want to raise their hand and be unmuted? Or you could drop a question in the chat if you don't want to be on camera. Okay. All right, well, in that case, if you do have more comments or think of something after this webinar, as again, we do have this more in-depth survey that we would love to have folks fill out. So feel free to scan this QR code and submit your comments by April 21st. You can also visit our RGGI Engage webpage at nj.gov/RGGI/engage. We also have, I believe, a comment box on there. So you could submit just a more simplified comment there. And next steps. So we will be having one more public meeting next Tuesday, April 18th. It's going to be on carbon sequestration and talking about all of the blue carbon and forestry and urban forest projects and what that could look like in the future for the next strategic funding plan. So we definitely encourage folks to please attend that as well if you want to, hear from some of our carbon sequestration experts in the state and hear what can be done in that regard. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to my colleagues at the board and at the Economic Development Authority. I really appreciate you all presenting today. And thank you to our audience. We really love your really in-depth comments, and this will definitely help us states move forward with finalizing our funding plans. So thanks, everybody. Have a lovely day.